Good afternoon and welcome back, ladies, gents and Pikachus, to another edition of the Quran of the Muslims, the analysis and breakdown. We're going to go through this verse by verse, breaking those verses down into factual, logical statements in English that we can understand, and then we can figure out who or what is Allah, what does he intend for you and I and the rest of the non-believer world, and more importantly, how is this going to affect us in the world today? So, we've been going through Sharia, the law of the Islamic cultures, and the last episode we went through the first law of Sharia, which is the law of equity when concerning murder, which might sound very nice, but actually it's not all that nice unless you are a Muslim. So the summary of that law is it's not considered murder if a Muslim kills a non-Muslim, but if a Muslim kills another Muslim, that is considered murder, unless the Muslim kills the Muslim slave, in which case that's fine, you just bung them another slave. And if they kill a concubine or a woman, that's also fine, just shove them a woman from your collection. And the most important thing to remember is when someone dies, it doesn't matter what happens to their soul, that's not even mentioned. The important thing to Allah is who gets the stuff, who gets the dead person's money and belongings, and more importantly, how much of it is going to the mosque. So that's the first law. Now we're going to look at the second law, which is fasting and Ramadan. So, with that in mind, let's get started. 128. O believers, you must observe fasting and prayer during the period of Ramadan, except who is unwell or travelling elsewhere. Doesn't really have much definition there, it just says travelling. Missed days should be made up later, lest you repay a ransom to your mosque, either in gold or hardships. Those who are reluctant are punished with further days and should know. It is better if you freely do your time fasting and praying. Oh, if you only knew the pain you shall receive. God will not put to you any obstacle or a difficulty to prevent you glorifying him in this way, and he requires of you the full period of fasting days. So, let's get started. O believers, he's obviously talking only to the Muslims here, which is him saying, don't expect that the non-believers and the scummy Jews and Christians are going to do this. No, they're not good enough. They're not righteous. That's why they don't do this. So the between the lines thing is Allah is saying, if you do this, you are like righteous and gloriful, just simply because you did this. Then he says, you must observe fasting and prayer during the period of Ramadan, which is 40 days, except he who is unwell or in travelling elsewhere. Now, it's very generic, this. It just says if you're unwell or if you're travelling elsewhere. So literally, if you're depressed, does that count as unwell? Or maybe you've got a cold. If you've got a cold, you don't have to do it. This is like the halal thing where it goes, you must observe halal and not eat pork, shellfish or things of the blood of a creature, unless you don't have anything else in your larder, and then you can just do what you like. I think this is kind of like this. This is another one of those examples where Allah is giving very strict rules that the mosque are going to have to enforce. So this is like giving the mosque a weapon against the people. So the mosque are the administrators of this. And if you can convince your mosque you are unwell, i.e. if you shove them some money and you say, tell everyone I've got a cold, then it's okay, because the mosque are the administrators. And when it says travels elsewhere, does this include if you've travelled to another country to set up your Islamic faith in their country? Because technically then, nobody who is not in an Islamic country needs to do Ramadan unless they choose it. I mean, the thing is, it doesn't actually define it very well. So as far as I know, everyone has to do 40 days Ramadan, apart from if you're in another country, or if you're unwell, you've got a cold, or you're depressed, or if your mosque agrees with you that you fulfill those two conditions. Then it goes on. Those who are reluctant are punished with further days and should know. It is better if you freely do your time fasting and praying. Oh, if you only knew of the pain you shall receive. So again, if we break this down, Allah is using his lying and threatening that he normally does and his cursing, the three things that he loves the most. And the reason he's doing that is because he even says the first line is those who are reluctant. So if the mosque aren't going to let you off and you absolutely have to do your fasting, you're obviously going to be reluctant to do it, because 40 days with no food and no women isn't the greatest thing ever. Anyone who has enjoyed either of those things will agree that. So that's why he starts the sentence, those who are reluctant are punished with further days. So it's like saying, if you don't do Ramadan for 40 days, we're just going to make it 41. If you don't do 41, we're just going to make it 42. If you don't do 42, and so on and so on. So it's a threat, isn't it? And then he says, it is better if you freely do your time fasting and praying. Oh, if you only knew of the pain you shall receive. So he doesn't actually say, Allah doesn't actually say there is going to be any pain, and doesn't describe that there's any punishment for not doing this outside of your mosque punishing you, which is obviously up to them. But Allah himself doesn't actually say that he's going to punish you for not doing the fasting. He just says, oh, if you only knew, so it's like, again, he's using this narrative speculation to implant the idea in your head, O Muslims, that if you don't do the fasting correctly, Allah will punish you. But as we know, Allah will not punish you, the mosque will punish you, and as long as you sweeten them up with some gold or, favour, then it's okay. So in actual fact, Allah is actually telling us here, between the lines, it's the mosque that are enforcing the Ramadan, not Allah. God will not put to you any obstacle, nor a difficulty to prevent you glorifying him in this way, and he requires of you the full period of fasting days. So breaking that down, as we know, the full period of fasting days is around about 40 days. It doesn't say why it is 40 days. I've got a fair idea where they stole this from out of the Torah, because in the Torah they fast for 40 days. And actually in the Gospels, Jesus fasts in the desert for 40 days. And there's a good reason why it's 40 days, but we won't go into that here because it's not in the Quran. Then he says he won't put an obstacle or difficult to you to prevent you glorifying him. So what that means is, go and do your 40 days. If you have any excuses, it's not Allah that's causing these excuses. So the mosque have every reason to say, no, we're not listening to your excuses. You're not worshipping him enough. Go and do your fasting. That's what this means. And he requires of you the full period of fasting days. So just fucking do it. Don't argue. Don't give any excuses. The mosque will kick your ass. Allah will not kick your ass, but you're supposed to think he will. So if you're a Muslim, do the fasting. If you don't, off with your head, you're dead. That's how it goes. So let's carry on. 129. When my servants who supply the worship to me, I can't read my own writing. When my servants who supply this worship to me do ask, I shall draw closer to them. I will imbue them with a will to follow my laws and believe only in me, that they will obey me. Well, we got there in the end. So, breaking this down, if I can read my own crappy writing. I write like a surgeon, honestly. It's basically illegible. So he says, when my servants who supply my worship to me do ask, I draw closer to them. And this is kind of like where God says anyone who prays will receive. This isn't Allah saying anyone who prays will receive. This is Allah specifically saying his servants only, his Muslims only. When his Muslims who supply the worship, so only good Muslims, when good Muslims who do the Quran worship ask him, then he shall draw closer. So he's very sketchy on the details. It's not like God says, I will answer your prayers. Allah just says, I will draw closer to you. So that might mean he looks over at you, or he hovers above your head for a few minutes, or it might mean that he gives you the full prayer service. We just don't know. I will imbue them with a will to follow my laws and believe only in me, that they will obey me. So what he's saying here is his servants who supply him with worship, the good Muslims who do the Quran stuff, if they make a prayer, he's not saying he will answer it. He's saying he will make them want to follow his laws more. So if you're a Muslim and you pray, what Allah is going to do for you is make you want to pray more. That's what I'm reading from this. Let's read it again just to make sure I'm right. When my servants who supply me this worship do ask, I shall draw closer to them. I will imbue them with a will to follow my laws and believe only in me, that they will obey me. So that's definitely what Allah is saying. He's saying, good Muslims, when you pray to Allah, he's not going to necessarily do the thing you pray for, but he is going to make you want to pray more and more and more. And the reason you're going to be praying more and more and more is so that you can obey Allah and pray him more and more and worship him. It's what it says. If you don't believe me, read the Quran. It's right here. I didn't write it. Allah did. In his own words, that's what he says. Let's carry on. 131. You may take your wives all upon the evening of the fast and enjoy their company as you pleasure them with your company. Wear them as you do your garments. Then refrain from them in fasting, for Allah knoweth what you secretly do amongst yourselves, but he forgave you this sin. So now associate only with your wives. Eat and drink to your fill until the breaking dawn. Then you will fast until the fall of night and retreat into your mosque and away from women. Show restraint as Allah guides to men, and do not break the conditions Allah has set forth. And be clear, not to take hold of the concubines, nor the wives of others, nor offer them as bait for the preachers to hide your own wrongdoing, nor hold any intent towards food, nor women. A long verse there, but as it's to do with Ramadan, I feel like that's the reason so much effort is going into this, because he claimed at the beginning, it's really important that you do this. Allah dictates that you must do this if you're a good Muslim, unless you're feeling unwell or you're in another country that's not a Muslim country, or if your mosque says you don't have to. So for everyone else, they have to do this. So what this is effectively saying is, before you do the fast, on the evening before you go to sleep and wake up and do your fasting, you may take your wives, plural, you may take your wives upon the evening of the fast and enjoy their company as the pleasure that you give them. So what Allah is saying here is, before you do the fast, go and have sex with all your wives, because you're not going to be able to have sex with them during the fast. But he goes further than that. He says, wear them as you do your garments. So what I think he's saying there is, have sex with them all day, because you will wear your garments all day. I can't see what else he would mean by that. Like I say, it's me speculating here. This isn't actually in the Quran of the Muslims. It doesn't actually define it. But according to me, wearing your garments all day is what you will do with garments. So wearing your wives like you do your garments probably means have sex with them for the whole day before you do the fasting. That's just what I think. Refrain from them in fasting, for Allah knoweth what you secretly amongst yourselves will do, but he forgave you your sins. So that's interesting, isn't it? Breaking that down. Have a lot of sex with your wives for the day before you do the fasting, but then refrain from them, because Allah knoweth what you secretly do amongst yourselves, but he forgave you that sin. So I think, even though, once again, it's not very well defined here, what you secretly do amongst yourselves includes lots of fornication, sleeping with lots of concubines, raping the prisoners of war or the non-believers, or doing any of this kind of stuff. What Allah is saying is, even the day before you do the fast, which is like your holy day, when you're leading up to your holy day, don't just cram in a load of sex with prostitutes and raping prisoners and fornicating before you do that. He's saying, get yourself ready for the day of fasting, which I suppose is quite intelligent, so that by the time it comes along, you're actually in gear to actually do it and complete it. So it's not 100% bad, it's just about 90% bad. So effectively what Allah is saying is, don't sleep with prostitutes, don't rape your prisoners, don't do anything else apart from have a whole day of sex with just your wives, and then go to sleep and wake up and do your fast. And if you have done anything before that, so if you've had a lot of sex in the previous week with prostitutes or raped prisoners of war or had little boys or done any of the other things that we know happen in these kind of situations, no details mentioned, that will be forgiven by Allah, as long as you do the whole day of sex with your wives and no one else, and then you do your day of fasting for Ramadan. Eat and drink to your fill with until dawn breaking, then you will fast until the fall of night, and retreat into your mosque and from women. Show restraint as Allah guides to men, and do not break the conditions Allah has set forth. So the reason he's saying this is, he's saying, now that you know what you're going to do on the day before your fast and the day of your fast, eat and drink to your fill until dawn breaking before that. So he's saying, you're going to fast. The day before you're going to fast, you're going to do less, to facilitate you getting through the fast. So before that day, stuff your face as much as you can, get in all the debauchery you can, do all the fornication, do all the raping the prisoners, do all the prostitute sex, then. But the day before the fast is when that stops and you start lowering yourself into the day of fasting. And he also says, then you retreat into your mosque and away from women. So if this is to be believed, what Allah is actually saying here is, during your period of fasting, after you've had sex with your wives then gone to sleep, when you wake up, you literally have to retreat into your mosque and not see any food or any women, and just hang around with other Muslims, other Muslim men. So I think what Allah is saying here is, he doesn't want you to even be looking or thinking about any temptation of food or women. And because he knows you're not a trustworthy person, O Muslim, in his own words, he's saying, retreat into your mosque and away from women. Show restraint as Allah guides to men, and do not break the conditions Allah has set forth. So even though he's already said that, he's a second time saying, don't you dare, Muslims, get in the mosque now, lock yourself in and blind yourself for the day. Don't even think about food or women. Don't look at food or women. Have no intent to break these conditions. Because he's saying if you're outside the mosque, the probability is you will. And then we round out the verse by saying, and be clear, not to take hold of the concubines, nor the wives of others, nor offer them as bait for the preachers to hide your own wrongdoing, nor hold any intention towards food nor women. So, and that brings us to the end of our short reading, but I feel like we need to explain this a little bit. The reason he's saying, and be clear, because even though he's already told you twice in very concrete terms that when you're fasting, you're not to take women or food and you have to hide from it. And to be clear, not to take hold of the concubines nor the wives of others. So what Allah is saying is don't sneak round the corner and have sex with another prostitute or someone else's wife or someone else's concubine that you won't get caught for, because Allah is watching you and will know that you've done it. And don't offer these things, food, concubines or other people's wives, as bait to the imam, the preachers. Don't try and bribe the preachers up front so that you don't have to do proper fasting or to hide your own wrongdoing, and don't even think about it. Don't have any intention towards it. So Allah is saying, this is what's going to be in your head, Muslims. All this debauchery, selling, bribing, arranging so that you've paid off your imam so you can sneak around the corner and have a prostitute while everyone else is fasting. Don't even fucking think about it. Allah is saying, don't do it. Don't bribe anyone else to let you get away with it. Don't even have any intention. Don't even fucking think about it. No. That's what Allah is saying here. So, and that brings us to the end of our reading. So I think what we can tell here, the first rule was kind of written in a more legal fashion. It was like point after point and there wasn't any funny language in there. But I feel like a different person has written this rule about Ramadan. So it almost makes you think, doesn't it? Maybe the first rule has been revised a few times and has taken shape as a kind of point by point, like a bullet point law. But this one is like a preacher actually telling you. This is like if you're sat in a mosque and a preacher's telling you, O believers, you must observe fasting during the period of Ramadan, apart from this, that and the other if you're unwell or you're travelling. So it is like the halal thing. It's not really as hard and fast as they make it. If you can convince your mosque and your imam that you can get away with it, you can. And that means you can go back to your debauchery, fornication, raping of prisoners and your prostitute sex. But I've got to say, the bit that stuck out to me as being particularly weird, again, this might be my white Western man bias, but there's a particular bit where it says, wear your women like your garments. Now, as we've discussed, it's not actually particularly well described in there, but you wear your garments all day. That's the only particular thing the only particular thing that happens to your garments that doesn't happen to anything else is that you wear them for the whole day. So what Allah is effectively saying here is the day before you do your fasting, you're only allowed to have sex with your wife. Even though the rest of the time you can have concubines, sex slaves, whatever, prisoners of war. On this particular day, O Muslims, no, you have to be a normal husband to your wives, plural, you can have up to 10, and that's the conditions that Allah has set forth. And he's even said, don't even think about it. I know what you're thinking. I know you're thinking you can sneak round the corner with someone else's wife or some other paid prostitute. No. And I know what you're thinking. You can't bribe the imam either with large amounts of money or favour. Don't even fucking think about it. Allah says no, and he's watching you to make sure you do it properly. And as he said in the middle section, he will not put any obstacle in your way to stop you from glorifying Allah in this way. So if any obstacle appears or you manage to fuck this up somehow and not do your fasting properly and the day before with your wives, it's your fault. You're not glorifying Allah. You're a non-believer. Off with your head, you're dead, according to Allah in the Quran of the Muslims. And that brings us to the end of our reading. So that's the end of this video. I feel like that was a short, easy one to get through, but it's really important that we remember this in relation to the other laws. Like the last one was bullet points of law and murder. This one a little bit more relaxed and a bit more jovial, talking about, wearing your wife like a garment and all such things. So that's the end of this one. Tomorrow we'll be going through the next law. I don't want to ruin the surprise for you, but it's going to be a good one. So God bless, have fun, and I'll see you back here tomorrow, and I'll see you then. Bye now. Anyone who watched the last one's probably thinking, what? That isn't very warlike. You just wait until the next one. So I'll see you back here tomorrow at 7:15. Until then, enjoy yourselves, God bless, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now.